Hello. Hello, Facebook. Hello, LinkedIn. Hello, YouTube. This is Linda Murray Bullard. They call me the business plug, and you have just plugged into the Business Plugs Mixer, which comes on every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to bring you business topics for business people. Now, go ahead and share this on your page. If you have friends, share it in their messenger. Make sure that you have clicked on and subscribe to the channels so that way you can see when we're on, because I have some guests coming on through the week who are going to be just as wonderful as my weekend guests. And so, two things I need to remind you of. One is, if you are attending the Understanding Grants Masterclass, that's going to be this coming Saturday at 6 o'clock p.m. on Facebook. So if you're interested in that, the tickets are on the event page of LSMB Business Solutions. So it's Understanding Grants Masterclass, and I'm doing it free because it's my annual give back to the community. So I want to make sure that I teach people how to get set up for grants, who has the grants, and then how to apply for the grants. And so that's what that session is going to be about. In addition to that, if you have a business and you would like to ensure that your foundation is solid and able to support your success, I have the 360 business solutions that is going on right now for business owners. And my Black Friday sale will be about the 360 business assessment. It's going to help you to comb through your business model, find out where there are gaps, and then create a checklist of closing in those gaps so that you can have a infrastructure that's sustainable for you and your business. So now that's all the housekeeping stuff. Go ahead and like the page. If you're a business owner, please go ahead and join the LSMB business group, which is a free Facebook group. It's called Building Your Own Six Figure Business. It's on Facebook. It's a free group. I drop grants and business information and applications and all kind of stuff. Everything that's important to business owners in that group, and it's a free group. All you have to do is make sure that you answer the questions, because if you don't answer the questions, you don't get to get in. So join. It's called Building Your Own Six Figure Business. It's on Facebook and it's an active group with over 550 members already in it. So now that's all the housekeeping. And this afternoon, I'd like to introduce to you my guest, who I am just blown away by. Hey, Myra.
How are you, Linda?
I'm good. I'm good. So Myra Fonville, tell us about Myra.
I am a pharmacist by education. I worked as a retail pharmacist for about 15 years before
Mm,
I transitioned into clinical research. And clinical research is basically overseeing clinical trials. And clinical trials are the way that we determine whether or not drugs are effective. So my
yeah,
job has been primarily to oversee making sure that the physicians who are conducting the clinical trials are adhering to the rules and regulations and ensuring the patient's safety while they're in the trial.
I love it. I love it. And see, a lot of people don't know about clinical trials, right?
Right. And a
And
lot
so,
of people don't know,
yeah,
especially minority people.
all right.
And that's, I guess, one of my passions is to make sure, because I think that a lot of people are fearful of clinical trials. And
Mm,
that's basically due to the history that's been associated with, medical research and pharmaceutical research,
absolutely.
because, throughout slavery and even after slavery, lots of minorities, not just Black people, but even Hispanic people, Native Americans, poor people, have been subjected to unethical medical practices in the name of research.
Yeah,
And what people don't understand is that because of these atrocities of the past, that now we have such strict rules and regulations that you will prevent these types of things from happening again.
Mm.
And we need to be aware of that and understand that so that we can move forward, because by not participating in clinical trials, we are possibly, not actually getting medications that are effective for us,
Mm.
you
And
know.
that's important. That's very important. And I'll talk about, so a pharmaceutical place comes up with a new drug,
Hmm.
and if it's not an emergency situation, then it goes through a process where they test it.
Right.
And
So you have different phases of clinical trials. You have phase one, phase two, phase three, and phase four. So a phase one trial basically is a trial where this is in the very beginning. Like you say, if it's not an emergency, a life and death situation,
mhm,
you have a group of people who don't even really have to have whatever the medical condition is, which is a bit scary, but there are people who do volunteer for that. But so those people are willing to go into a facility and actually stay there, for overnight. Sometimes it may be for a few weeks or a week or whatever, and they will take the medication, and this helps medical professionals to determine whether or not the people are actually having any type of toxic effects from the medication. So
mm,
they'll try different dosages. They'll, periodically drawing blood samples, just trying to make sure that it's actually in somebody's bloodstream, and at what level is basically a level where they're seeing that side effects or whatever are, occurring. So then phase two trial is a little bit better, because at that point they know exactly what the level the adverse effects will start to take place. So the drug dosage is a little bit more calculated for a phase two trial, and this is where you start trying to recruit people who actually have whatever the medical condition is. Let's say if it's diabetes, so this is where you're trying to actually recruit people who are diabetic, and you know what the level of the drug is. You're not sure exactly what the precise level is, but you know which level not to exceed.
right.
So once they establish all of that and they've determined that this seems to be the optimum level, then you go to a phase three trial. And so the phase three trial is not only to make sure that that dosage level is accurate, but also that it's for a longer period of time, that it's safe.
Hmm.
And so phase three trials usually go on for a year or more, whereas your phase one and two, phase one is very short, phase two is usually just, a few months. And then phase three are usually longer term, because you want to see the effects, want to make sure that it not only is effective, but it's safe in a long term.
Mm.
And usually once a drug completes the phase three trial, it's actually approved by the FDA if everything is in good standing.
Okay.
So phase four trials are conducted for drugs that are already approved, but you still want to either, most times you're just going through to make sure the long-term safety, is exactly what you thought it was. And sometimes it's also used if, let's say during the course of a trial, you realize that a drug is really seems to be effective in more than one area. For instance, let's say, Rogaine. Rogaine actually started out as a tablet that was actually called Lonitin. It was used for blood pressure, but they
Mm.
realized when using it that people's hair started growing.
Isn't that
So
funny? I love
exactly,
that. I love that.
So yeah,
That's amazing.
yes,
And so and it happens, right, in the medical field where they'll create a drug like Botox, right?
right,
Like Botox was toxic when it came to like aspirin, I mean, a Tylenol, right? The
right,
whole scare we had years ago, decades ago,
right,
concerning Botox and stuff. And then now people are actually getting Botox put in their face and
right,
using for headaches.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. What do they
So,
call that when it comes as one thing and then they make it useful for something else?
um, I don't know. I don't know what the exact term is for that,
Yeah, but
but
I used to know when I I've had this COVID brain going right here, but I used to know
You and
exactly
I
what that
both.
was, and because I worked in insurance, and
Okay.
we processed those claims. So, like those clinical research claims, we would process all the people that went through that trial if they had our insurance.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So we would pay the doctor or the hospital, or if they didn't have a grant or whatever, we would pay them money, medical money, for those people having those tests and treatments and things.
Right.
Yeah, so I remember that. But yeah, so they go through stages one, two, three, and then after it hits the market, and then there's a fourth stage. And see, why this is important to me, because one of my great friends was a clinical research manager at the hospital where I used to work. And
Okay.
so we used to talk about, when they first came out with drugs, what that looked like, because her staff actually did the clinical research for the hospital. And I remember her telling me about stages one and two, right? And I
Right.
was like, okay, so with this COVID injection thing, I'm going to wait till they get to stage three. I'm wait till they get to stage three, and then I'm going to go get
Right.
my injection. But unfortunately, COVID didn't care about all that. So COVID actually hit me prematurely and that took me
Right.
out, about killed me. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I ended up having to take the shot. I don't know if they were in stage three or not. It didn't matter at that point. After I woke up from that coma, it was like
Right.
whatever we got, I'm taking it. And so
Right.
yeah, but yeah. So how did you? What is the training for someone who wants to get in your field?
Um, in most cases, a person needs to have at least a bachelor's degree. There are some instances where some people with associate's degrees are accepted, and it depends on what their degree is in. Like if you have an associate degree, let's say perhaps if it were in something like nursing or something like pharmacy tech or something like that. Sometimes you have those people who are accepted with just an associate degree. But if you have a bachelor's degree, and most times it doesn't even matter in what, if you can find a company that will allow you with the entry level, you can enter into the field. And the training basically consists of, learning medical terminology, learning how to review medical records. Honestly, when I first started, our training was a lot more intense than what it is now. And I
Mm.
really think that we need to revert back to
Yeah.
some of the more intense training. Because I think that people need to understand the foundation. They need to
Mhm.
understand why we have the rules and regulations that we have, and that our primary goal is to ensure patient safety.
Right.
And I think if people understand the foundation and recognize those things, then they'll be more diligent in doing and performing their duties.
Mhm.
That's just my, that's my way of thinking.
Hey, makes sense to me, and we'd have less recalls, right?
Right, exactly. And that's exactly right. I think we'll definitely have less recalls if people are more diligent about, actually doing this. Because what the job, now there are a lot of different jobs within the clinical research field, but most people typically seem to like to start out or gravitate towards the position that's called a clinical research associate. And those are the people that actually travel out to the different investigative sites and review the records. And
Okay.
people like that job because, for one thing, you're traveling all over the country, or sometimes the world, depending on the trial. And so you get a chance to go to a lot of different places, and do a lot of different things, on your downtime. But it's a nice job, but it's a serious job,
Yeah.
and so but people like it just because of the travel aspect of it. But it's serious in the sense that, like I said, you have to be able to really understand and be able to compare, like you need to be able to review the patient's medical records, including their medical history, understanding that the medical history and, their needs to match up with their medications that they're taking, and that anything that anytime anybody has anything that goes, that is wrong with them during a clinical trial, even if it's something just like a typical headache, if they stump their toe and break it, anything like that has to be documented and reported, even though it is probably not even associated with the investigational drug. But the reality is, at that point, we don't really know what's associated with the drug. So even if somebody thinks it's not associated, it still needs to be documented.
Right.
And so this is why, training is so important, because people need to be able to understand that and basically, reiterate that, to the sites, so that they're aware and they know exactly what they should be doing.
Mm,
So,
mm. And so that information is given back to the manufacturer.
yes, it's given back to the manufacturer, which in clinical research we call the sponsor. So it's given back to the sponsor, and then the sponsor has to compile all that and submit everything to the FDA.
Mm,
And so this is how the FDA determines whether or not this drug is not just safe but effective.
mm. That's not, and how so let's talk about what's in the news right now. What's in the news right now is about giving babies or small children the new vaccinations,
Mhm.
right? And a lot of people are saying, well, that's testing on kids. What?
That's a big, it's a big controversy in clinical research in general, because most pharmaceutical companies do not like to test on children unless it's something that's specific to children. Same thing with pregnant women. Pregnant women and children are probably the ones who receive the least amount of participation in clinical trials,
Mm,
because everybody's afraid of possible I guess adverse or
absolutely.
reactions, because you have to really be able to taper the dosage accordingly. And anytime anybody's in a clinical trial, they have to nowadays give permission. Back in the day, they would just experiment on you, but now the patient has to give consent. So
Mm,
with a child can't legally give consent. So
right,
it's up to the parents to make that decision.
right.
And it's very difficult to get parents to say, I'm going to allow you to use something experimental on my child.
Yeah,
So in situations like that, a lot of times trials don't go very far, because they don't get enough participants to actually determine whether or not it's effective or not. But
mm,
in situations such as this pandemic, and situations that are life threatening, like oncology, and cancer trials or whatever, a lot of times exceptions are made, and with regard to, okay, we're not going to say that we're looking for 500 people or whatever to say that this is effective. We just have to go with it, because this is life threatening. It's a life threatening situation. And I know that a lot of people are skeptical, but it's in the best interest of safety, I believe.
mm.
And I mean, and being that I've had COVID, you've had COVID, we know how devastating
It
that
can
can
be.
be, you
Yeah.
know. And I think that people you have to weigh the risk.
Right, right, with everything, right? And that's
Exactly.
the thing, I thought about, people, everybody was like, did you get vaxxed? Did you get vaxxed? And I was like, no, no, because I was waiting for the clinical trials.
Right.
It's like I knew about them, and I was waiting for the clinical trials to move before I actually took the vaccination. And then I became regretful because I really, really, really should have went ahead and did it anyway. I really should
Yeah.
have, because of my health, my health status. And so when you thank you all, I'm now seeing my comments. So hello, Louise. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And hello, somebody's on LinkedIn. I can't see who you are. Hello, Raven Juliet. So thank you, thank you. So she's talking about clinical trials have been completed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Raven,
good. Thank you
yeah,
for that.
Raven and I worked together in the past. She's
Okay.
excellent. Yeah, she's an excellent CRA. So she's uh
Well, it's good to know. That's great
yeah.
to know. Raven, that needs to be publicized, because I know people think that the vaccinations themselves are going to be the clinical trials. Like that's
Yeah.
That's the feedback I've heard from people. So if that information is available, if you can put a link to it in the chat, that would be wonderful. So yeah, so getting off that subject, but just talking in general about clinical trials. So a person, so let's talk about what you do now in your clinical studies. So you're looking for physicians that do studies. Tell me what your
Well,
job does now.
Well, I don't. I'm not going to say it's my job, but basically, what I guess my passion is.
Your passion.
There's a lot of uproar with regard to increasing diversity in clinical research,
Yeah.
particularly in diversity in clinical research participants. And this is very important because this is what I was mentioning earlier about how we as minorities do ourselves a disservice by not participating in trials because science has shown us that some medications work differently in women, some medications work differently in people of different ethnicities and different races. And this is a lot of times attributed to not just your environment, but your diet, your habits, and these sorts of things. And if we don't participate in the trials, we don't know, if this drug is really going to be effective for everybody. We don't know what dosage is more effective for persons that have similar ethnicities or backgrounds as we have.
Right,
And
right.
so right now, as far as clinical trial participants, we have roughly about 68% of the participants are Caucasian. And
Mm,
of those 68%, 75% of those are males. And
mm.
so, there's a disproportionate amount of quantity of minorities participating as well as women. And I think a lot of this has to do, like we mentioned earlier, the atrocities of the past. People are still remembering those things and they're affected by that. And it's what I say is I call it generational trauma
Mm.
because people, we hear these stories that are passed down from generation to generation about what went wrong. How somebody experimented on this guy who called himself this J. Marion Sims, who was the called the father of gynecology, who did all
Mm.
these, atrocious things to
Yeah.
slaves, just in the name of research, or the Tuskegee experiment that we're
We
all
can't
so
forget.
familiar with. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the United States government, when they shut it down in the United States, they went to Guatemala and did the same thing,
Mm.
and with regard to the syphilis. And they used even the same doctors to perform experimentations. And
Mm.
so this is one of the reasons why Hispanics are hesitant, and there's so many things that have been done to Native Americans, over the years, using them as guinea pigs for vaccines and this sort of thing. But, the reason that this is the reason why minorities don't participate, but we have to educate them that, things have changed. But in doing so, I feel like it's very important for for us to everybody to acknowledge this. The pharmaceutical industry is what I'm speaking of primarily, to even acknowledge that, okay, these things happened, but
Right.
now we have to move forward. And this is how the situation is now. These are the rules and regulations that we abide by, and show that to people and educate the community. But the
Absolutely.
way that I feel to really reach the community is to engage those physicians who are already trusted in the community. Because
Right.
right now, the predominantly number of physicians conducting the research are Caucasian males, which is
Mm.
why that's what you see reflected in the patient population.
And the thing about it is, I remember hearing back when I think it was the American Heart Association that released that the information that they had used for like heart, the heart health or whatever was based on Caucasian men.
Right,
And so when they learned that, okay, these other people were having a heart attack, like women were feeling it in their neck and the other shoulder,
right,
and it was everything about men, and that's where the clinical trials are. So if we're not participating in the clinical trials, then that leaves only the people that show up to the clinical trials. And so therefore
Exactly.
the medications that we're taking may be more harmful because I remember people talking about metformin, right? So
Right.
typically some people can't take it because it has adverse reactions to them, whereas other people can because
Right.
it's safe and useful and effective for them. So just understanding that when we say we're not going to be in the clinical trials or we're not going to participate in the research, then we put ourselves at risk.
That's exactly right. We're contributing to the healthcare disparities that we complain about by not
Wow.
participating. Because
Wow.
we're limiting ourselves. And so I would love to be in a position where, I feel like pharmaceutical companies and CROs are what we call contract research organizations that are typically, these are companies that are hired by the pharmaceutical companies to oversee the clinical trials for them. So we
Mm,
have to make sure that pharmas and CROs are actually seeking
mm,
minority physicians to conduct clinical research, because
mm.
this is who's trusted within the minority community. Because it's very difficult if I tell you that Dr. Schwartz over here wants you to take an experimental drug, and he's not only going to pay you to take it, but he's going to pay for your transportation to get to his office out in the suburbs and pay for you to get back home. You're going to be like, oh, no, I don't know. That doesn't sound right.
that,
You
that's
know, but but if I have, Dr. Williams, who you've been going to for years, who's doing the same research, then you trust him, you know him, you understand that he's not going to do anything to you that's going to be detrimental. He's
absolutely.
not,
And he already has your health,
that's
right?
right.
He already has the
Exactly.
plethora of your health medical
Exactly.
information. And so should something arise, he's probably the best person
Right.
to address it.
So what I would like to do is I'd like to be able to assist with training these physicians so that they're in a position to conduct clinical trials. But that's
Mm.
just the first step, because then we have to also, like I say, educate the community. We also have to get the farmers and the CROs to utilize those sites, where these doctors are, because right now they're so accustomed to using the same sites over and over and over
The
again.
network, yeah.
And so they have this network of people. And I
Yeah.
don't understand why it is within this country that anytime we bring up diversity, everybody thinks that if we want to include other groups, that means that we're diminishing something for the people who already have, which is not the case, because there's enough for everybody.
Absolutely.
And we have to understand that and realize that. And
Yeah, that's the poverty mindset. And it's
right.
competition and it's not enough to go around and all the things that you hear about the people who think poverty. Because there are what 8 billion, almost 8 billion people in the world. So there's plenty of people.
Right.
It's not
Exactly.
like it's not like any one agency is going to be able to serve us all. And
Right.
so that
You know,
that just that's a conversation worth having.
right.
So if anyone listening to this who has the power to bring people to the table and have that conversation, right? And then address the problem as far as meeting with you and then seeing how they can map out a strategy that will help to get more minorities into clinical research so that our numbers could be better reflective of who we are and our body chemistries. And people talk about, oh, people are people, but our whole makeups, we come from different places
Exactly.
genetically. And so when you understand genetics and you understand people come from different places, then you understand why it's important for all groups of people to be represented at the clinical research table.
Right. And pharmaceutical companies really need to start trying to make a better effort of making sure that there's an adequate representation, because just like with regard to diabetes trials, or
Mhm.
that diabetes is more prevalent in Native American communities, in African American communities, Hispanic, more so than in Caucasian communities, yet and still they still focus on the Caucasian,
Absolutely.
when recruiting patients,
And
this.
yeah, and metformin is another example because
Exactly.
Caucasians can take it with no issues. But then when African Americans take it, we have issues. Like people
Right.
being hospitalized and things. But on the Caucasian side, they can take it in no problem.
Yeah.
So understanding that we are different, and then recognizing the difference that doesn't make us bad. I mean, it
Exactly.
just is what it is.
And there have even been I've even worked on some clinical trials where something as simple as like the dosage of the drug or the drug itself is administered through a patch, let's say even for female hormones or whatever.
Mhm.
And they found that the few African Americans who were participating, the patch didn't really adhere to our skin the
Mhm.
same way it did the Caucasians. So we weren't getting the adequate dosage. So
Mhm.
things like that will never be recognized if we don't participate.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is great information and we can't see your name because you haven't told StreamYard they can use your name, but talking about the same thing we're talking about, like your medical doctor would be the best person to administer a clinical research because they do have your information already, right? And getting people to sign off and do the right things to the clinical trial. So I think it's great information. And it's great to have a conversation about and awareness about the need for all populations to consider participating in clinical trials.
Yeah. I want to make a comment about that, the last comment that showed on the field.
Mhm.
And, yes, clinical research professionals definitely are trying to ensure that the patient is safe. But I think also this is the main reason why we need to engage the community physician and train them in research as well, so that they understand that, but and realize too that they too have the patient's best interests at heart, because it benefits them as well. It benefits their medical practice as well as it benefiting their patients, because now they have an alternative solution so that they can provide adequate care for their patients and help their patients find something that works better for them than what they're already using.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. I love that. Great information. And oh, so this is Ashley Heard. She's the
Thank
LinkedIn
you.
user. She's our LinkedIn user.
Yeah, yes,
You can't see
I'm
your name.
familiar with Ashley. Hi, Ashley.
Okay. So she was saying to increase diversity, we should consider focusing on relationships with sororities and fraternities of the community.
I've actually been talking to someone about that, Ashley. I actually have a friend that I was, because I went to a HBCU, and
Okay.
I was talking to a friend who was talking to me about maybe partnering with them to have some sort of educational program for the Divine Nine, so that
Mm,
they are more familiar with clinical research and can assist in educating the communities about that. So
I
I think
love that.
that's excellent. Yeah.
I love it. And if we could drill that down, because and the cities, right? Getting
Right.
the cities, because you have recreation areas, and in some places they don't go to doctors. You
So
know,
true.
some people don't go to the doctor, they use the emergency room. Because we're notorious. I worked in insurance and I worked in the hospital, and a lot of people use the ER as their doctor.
Yeah.
So, in the case of getting it down to the population, that's the thing. A lot of the information doesn't trickle down to the people who can actually use it, right?
Right.
If we could use the community centers to do education about clinical research, it would be great. It would be great in order to get the information out to the people to get them to participate,
Right.
and possibly have those community doctors present at the community centers to,
Right.
to walk through some of those clinical trials.
Yeah. And I was going to comment on the comment that Raven just made. And,
Mhm.
the thing there, Raven, knows, as I agree that a lot of farmers do have outreach programs, but we have to somehow be able to reach out to physicians. And this, I think, probably goes back to, this is why we need more diversity within farmers and CROs, because they want to see somebody who looks like them, who's actually reaching out to them, with regard to this. And so
Right.
the whole diversity thing is just it's kind of like a snowball effect, because we need to have people who look like those physicians in order to engage those physicians and overcome the myths that they are talking about, because what they believe right now, because a lot of physicians believe that it's too much work, it's too much paperwork, it's too
Mm,
much this, and they don't look at the positive side of what clinical research can bring to their practice. And so we
absolutely.
need to actually be able to engage with them and so that they understand that, hey, look, this is what it really entails, and it's really not going to take up that much of your time, and also explain to them the benefits that it will have for their business as well as for their patients.
Right. And in most cases, it's like their common care. Like they may already be taking lab tests, right?
Right,
They may
right,
already be doing
exactly.
it. They're
Because
already
that's the main thing. We don't want them to deviate too much for them from their standard of care.
exactly.
So we want them to continue with their standard of care, but just add in a few other things in order to, to get this job done.
I think and when you talk about, so the other side of that is there is government, because I always see, so I do grants. I do grants and education about grants and stuff, and I always see where the government is paying for some of these clinical trials,
Yeah.
right? That may be another source of revenue for doctors to, while,
Well,
because they already have the patients, they
you know
already have.
even when the government's not paying, the pharmaceuticals companies are paying, so it's definitely a source of revenue for these physicians,
Absolutely.
and then they in turn can pay their patients because they're given a stipend to do that as well. And so
It's
this is a
win-win.
win-win. It's a win-win for not just the physicians, but also for their patients.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen those grants, and I've seen where a lot of clinical research, their government is looking for them under grants.gov. I haven't done the pharmaceutical, looking into that part of it, but I've definitely seen on grants.gov a lot of around diabetes, around common illnesses that
Right,
are plaguing our society, that the government does offer monies to carry out those research programs. So yeah,
right.
so but it's a great conversation. You've enlightened me on the process, reminded me, because look, the COVID brain has erased all previous life, but but you've reminded me about the different levels of the clinical trials and about how important they are for us, people who look like us, people who have health illnesses like ours, to be involved in clinical trials. So the next time here in Chattanooga, we have Wilkins Research sends out a lot of notices about different research studies that they're doing, like the laboratories. And
Okay.
then the hospitals send out information about clinical research and stuff. If you're being asked, please consider, because again, if we don't show up for the research, we don't get the benefit of the medications.
So true. So true.
Yeah.
And you are compensated financially for your time. A lot of times you can negotiate, you have your transportation provided to and from, your visits. It's definitely something worth checking into.
Right. And if we can get the information out to the people who can use it, that'd be a wonderful thing. That's why I wanted, thank you for your yes, for coming on and just having this conversation, because I think it's a conversation that needs to be shared, a conversation that needs to be had everywhere. So, because I get it when people talk about, the vax or the jab or whatever they're naming it this week. I don't know, but they're talking about things like that, and then how important clinical research is, and how people say, well, that hasn't been tested, or even if it's been tested, when it gets into a bigger population, things could happen, right?
Right,
So even in testing, even after the testing, when it gets to a bigger population, things go awry, and
right.
it happened. It's a whole part of it, but still understanding the importance for us to show up and be involved in clinical research,
I
like
agree.
how phenomenal it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, to say, yeah, well, I participated on the trial for that.
Exactly.
and it's
Exactly.
life saving
It's
for
very
people.
rewarding. It really is, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. My son, my middle son, when he was a year and a half old, he had to have a hernia surgery,
Hmm.
and that's when they came out with the liquid Band-Aid.
Oh, okay.
And they
Yeah.
asked me, can we put this on him? And I was like, well, yeah. I mean, because it was to see if it would hold his incision
Right.
after he had his surgery. And I was like, well, yeah. So I participated in the liquid Band-Aid back in the 80s.
That's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, but participating, it means something. And we really, really, really should share this information. And so I've put your contact information in the description. If anyone wants to have a conversation with Myra regarding this and to get her thoughts on how you and your doctors can have a conversation about doing clinical trials, then please reach out her in the information that I've provided. She is on Facebook. She's on LinkedIn. So you can reach out to her in those two places, or reach out to me and I'll connect you with her, whatever way that you can. But let's keep this conversation going. And so, in your parting remarks, ma'am, what would you like to say to people who are on the fence about clinical research?
I say do your homework. You can research different things online. If you're thinking about a clinical trial, there are different websites you can go to. One most popular one is clinicaltrial.gov, clinicaltrials.gov, and you can go on there. You can put in whatever your condition is, let's say diabetes, and search for trials, trial sites in your area, what type of clinical trials are going on, and then try to reach out to the different facilities in your area that are conducting trials and just have a talk with them and
Yeah,
find out what opportunities there are and what they can provide for you, that because I think ultimately it'll be beneficial to you, and it'll be
absolutely.
beneficial to the community. And we have to start thinking beyond ourselves, because like I said, we want to change these healthcare disparities that we have going on, and by not participating, we're contributing to them instead of
Mm.
solving the problem.
We're becoming a part of the problem.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's good stuff. That is great stuff. With again, thank you for your yes. And my name is Linda Murray Bullard. They call me the business plug. Today, I am plugging you in to Myra Fonville, and we're talking about clinical trials. Go ahead and if you have questions, put it in the chat, or if you have questions after we leave, we'll come back and make sure that your questions are answered. But thank you for joining the Business Plugs Mixer. I'll see you guys next Sunday here at 7 p.m. Please go ahead and subscribe and like the page so that you'll find the notifications when we're on. Coming up on the 27th, we're going to talk about buying businesses, acquisitions, conversations that are not being held in our community.
Mm.
Everybody's talking about starting new businesses, but there are actually businesses that are ready to close that you can purchase that already has a book of business, clients, customers, and just need you to walk in. We're going to have that conversation on the 27th with Laura Winegrove. So come back and join us on Thursday. Make sure you like and subscribe to the pages. You guys have a great rest of your evening. Goodbye.
Fine. Thank you.